Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. Where we're picking up today is on page 86. And we're picking up at the very, very bottom paragraph, page 86, in thinking about our day. And last week we spoke about on awakening and that first paragraph. And I'll just give us a chance to find where we're at by talking about the on awakening paragraph. And in it, it's talking about coming into a prayerful, meditative state, a reflection on what our day is to come, and talking about bringing our thoughts to fix our mind upon, which is the thrust of meditation, to focus my attention, my mind upon something. It says we consider our plans for the day. Now, before we do that, we ask God, and any time it talks about we ask, that is a prayer. So before we come into this meditative preview of our day, where we will seek guidance from a power greater than ourselves, we ask this power to direct our thinking. And what it looks like is, God, I ask that you direct my thinking, especially that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. And that's the state with which we bring ourselves into this meditative morning practice. And it talks about how our thought life will be on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. And last week I was going into detail about a thought life. I didn't know I had one of those. I just thought I had thoughts and I was my thoughts. There was not separation between me and my thoughts. And I'll tell you what was happening between the ears. I won't go into too much detail because I did last week. What was happening between my ears was especially difficult. It wasn't a fun place up here. It was not nice. I was not nice to me. I wasn't always nice to you. I was just stuck in misery in here. And so what we're trying to do is ask that we be removed from those dishonest motives. And if we do that, our thought life will be on a better plane. Now, here's where we really get into this meditative practice. Bottom paragraph, page 86. It says, in thinking about our day. So as we go through, okay, what is my day? Where would God have me be? Who would God have me help? Like bringing that into the prayer and thinking about that. We may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. So we might have this confusion where we're not sure. So what do? It says here, and then it says ask. And anytime in this book it says we ask, that is a prayer. So we kick off this meditation time with a prayer. And if we find that we are unsure about what we're called to do, where we're called to be, how we're called to show up, we again turn to prayer. And this is the prayer. We ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought or decision. And that word inspiration, now its Latin origin is inspirare, which does have to do with spiritual connection. I don't have the full etymology in my brain at the moment, which is shocking for a delinquent like me. I'm normally an etymology, like I'm on it. But again, that inspiration has to do with like from a power greater than ourselves. So we're asking for that inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. Now, this is the direction that follows. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. So we're not trying to think, and we're not trying to force the right thought, and we're not trying to figure it out. What are we doing? We are coming to a place. Now, this is what the Oxford group would describe it as, is openness and receptivity. I'm coming to a place where I'm waiting for an answer. I'm waiting for guidance. I was just about to say, welcome. We're on the bottom of 86, but Rob's on top of it. See, we relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. Rob's got it. Rob's got it. God's got it. Ain't no thing to worry about. But we relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. It says we're often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. So and I talk about this a lot as we get into the 11th step, a lot of times people will say with great assurance that meditation didn't mean meditation in the 1930s. It only meant thinking. And that is only true if all I do is I look up the word meditation in the dictionary and that's it. And I don't do any more looking, any more investigating. And the form of meditation that they're talking about when they talk about that first considering our plans for the day is a meditative technique that is known as discursive meditation, which is thinking, bringing our attention and thinking about and contemplating and mulling over. And so there is an element of that. But when we talk about this part of meditation, this is not discursive. It is more apophatic in nature, which is to say, what I'm doing is I'm coming to a place of stillness. I'm not trying to force stillness. I'm coming to receptivity. So bear with me. Let's say that Ben was going to throw things at me. Ben, right? And if I'm waiting for it, I hope there was a leg, because if not, if there was no leg, that was, I was right on it. I caught that invisible ball. But if there was leg, I probably got hit in the face. But if I'm waiting for Ben to throw a ball at me, and I'm in receptivity, I'm waiting for the ball to come. That's the position. And that's the position that we're at in our minds. It's like the idea, and you can even practice this, wait for your next thought. And as you wait for the next thought, your thoughts begin to quiet. And that's what's happening. We're waiting for direction and guidance from God. And I will let you know the direction, you can kind of feel when it's a direction and guidance from God and when it's not. And it's usually things like, did I do the laundry? Did I move the washing into the dryer? Probably not from God. Maybe if the stove is on, maybe that's a from God, don't burn the house down. I don't know. But a lot of times we talk about the voice of God as often that still small voice within. And if the voice of this power is a still small voice from within, I can't hear that quiet voice when there's a lot of noise and when there's a lot of clutter. And so that's what we're talking about, is coming to that place of receptivity. Now, I spoke about the apophatic method of meditation, and that was a meditation that did exist in the 1930s and much earlier. And apophatic is more directing your thoughts away from. So trying to quiet, trying to avoid. There is also cataphatic, which is bringing your attention to something. Now, part of why I'm so insistent that there is, of course, more forms of meditation. The first is because that's what the Oxford group was practicing. They practiced a meditative practice that was known as two-way prayer. And nowadays more known as two-way prayer. Back in the day, it was more guidance. And it was coming into this place of stillness. And so you might be like, girl, which kudos on the snap. Girl, why didn't they just say that? Why didn't they just tell us that we're doing two-way prayer like the Oxford group? Well, what Bill Wilson was really trying to do was separate Alcoholics Anonymous from the Oxford group. That's also part of, if you've ever noticed, the word surrender is not used in the first 164 pages. But the idea of surrender is all over it. So why wouldn't they use the word surrender? Well, surrender was Oxford group language. So they're trying to create that separation. They're not trying to point, hey, and then we'll do this thing that Frankie B. Nobody called him Frankie B. Frank Buchman, Frank Buckman, Frankie B. This is why they don't let me do history presentations. They're like, no, Frankie B. What up, my homie? Not cool, Paige. But Frank Buchman, we're not pointing to that because they did not want to be associated and tied into this. They wanted to be their own separate thing to avoid that. Not that the Oxford group was bad or wrong, but they were separate. And so that's what we're talking about. And again, I speak a lot of this when we talk about varieties of religious experience. I love that piece of literature. It's so interesting to me. And part of why I fell in love with that, it's not because it's an easy read. It is because it tied that thread together. I would hear people say meditation didn't mean meditation, and it didn't feel right. You know what you can just feel in your heart? It didn't feel like it made sense to me. Because you can kind of tell when people are meditating and when they're not. You can tell when somebody has a meditative practice and when they don't. Because it's usually like, I don't need to meditate. It's fine. Oh, I'm not saying it sounds like that all the time. I'm just saying they didn't meditate. It's only thinking, and I'm doing a lot of thinking, and it's working for me. And it was a lot of that. And I'm like, this doesn't line up with my lived experience of how that practice has brought deeper conscious contact with God, deeper awakenings. And I'm a gal who is not a whole lot of fun at parties. And I will go down spiritual rabbit holes, like reading varieties of religious experiences for fun, because I'm fun. And I would seek from a variety of faith traditions. And in it, there would be these medieval people who had meditative practices, and they were referenced in varieties of religious experiences. And there were meditative practices well, there was the Quietism movement. There was the Quakers had a meditative practice. In fact, they would experience an hour of quiet every day. And so these meditative practices, it's like they didn't exist, but they did. They did exist. And maybe they weren't as popular as like yoga is today, which is fine, but they did have that. And so the takeaway is, if what you're doing is working, amazing. Do it. Lean into it. And we get to seek and explore. But the directions that are in on awakening aren't just a thinking about it process. There is a process where we're wanting to connect and receive direction from God, receive guidance from God. And I promise it's more about the posture of my heart. It's more about that, like, I'm willing to seek than it is what I get. Does that make sense? Because I'll get stuck in like, does God want me to, get the job or buy the car? Or what does God want me to do? And God hasn't given me guidance and I need to. But it's about me trying to seek that connection. And guess what happens when I seek that connection? How I show up to everything changes. And it all works out just as it needs to. So it goes on to say, we're often surprised how the right answers come after we've tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. So these gut level feelings or these small voices or these experiences start out as like a hunch or an occasional thing. We then begin to experience the sense of being led and guided. And in the Ninth Step Promises, it talks about having in what used to baffle us becoming intuitive. How I'm trying to debate as to whether or not I should go and tell you a story, which is a bit of a tangent, or whether I should. Okay, I got a yes. Judy said yes, so it's all Judy's fault. I'm taking no personal responsibility on this. So I'll tell you an experience I had. And first and foremost, I don't care if you smoke, but I used to smoke. And I was addicted to nicotine. And then I found vaping because if my nicotine, I know, shocking, page at a tangent, who would have expected? Right? And I switched from cigarettes to vaping because listen, if my nicotine can taste like candy, ooh, I was all for it. And I like my sponsor at the time, she said, Paige, I never met anyone that vaped as much as you. Now, like a good sponsee, I didn't say anything, but in my head, I'm like, girl, I'll get to some more meetings. But like, if I had not been separated from nicotine before the COVID and before Zoom, I don't think y'all would know what I look like. I think you'd just see a white cloud of smoke the whole time. Like every inhale was a hole on the vape. Like I was on it. And it was like, that was real. And so what was happening is every year I was getting involved in this like spiritual exercise. And in that spiritual exercise, I would look to give something up, usually something that was getting in the way of me and God. And I would look to then add something to my prayer life. Because if I'm trying to give up something that I'm turning to instead of God, this isn't 12 step. This is just Paige having step 11 fun. And you might be like, really? Fun? Yeah, let me give up stuff. Woo! Yeah. Not one of the lights and colors and fun sort of religious things that I borrowed. But so if I'm looking to give something up that I turn to instead of God, I need to add something to my prayer and meditation life. And what I know to be true is I then also have to find an additional way to be of service. And so I would look to give something up. I'd look to add something to my prayer and meditation life. And I would look for an additional way to be of service. And I remember that it was right before COVID, and I knew what I wanted to give up. Or no, I didn't know what I wanted to give up. I knew what I wanted to add to my prayer life, and I was so jazzed about it. And I knew the way I wanted to be of service, but I didn't know what I wanted to give up. And I made the mistake of asking a couple of my sponsees. And do you know what they said? They said, you should quit vaping. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Now, I would never rank sponsees in any sort of preference or any sort of order, but bottom of the list is where they're going. Like, are you just absolutely not? That's the most insane thing I've ever heard of, you know? And what happened was I was at that time really active in a two-way prayer practice. So I remember I came to two-way prayer and I asked, what should I give up? And in the practice of two-way prayer, you ask a question. And you write it out and you do some reading of some spiritual literature. Doesn't matter if it's a religious textbook or a Hallmark card. You know what I mean? Some sort of spiritual literature. And then you come to a place of meditation, come to a place of stillness. And then you do this writing. You start with writing a term of endearment. My love, my beloved, my dear, my child. And you write whatever comes to mind. And it's that idea of like guided writing, as if your higher power was writing to you. That's what it is. And you just write, you don't edit. And if you get stuck, you just start with a term of endearment. You do that for about five minutes. And then you spend an additional 5 minutes sitting in the presence of your higher power at the end. And I don't even think it was at the point of writing. I think it was in those 5 minutes when I had what I like to call a Fitz-Mayo experience, which Fitz, my homie Fitz. I'll get the recording of Jim's thing. It's almost ready to go. We're almost there. I'll get that up. So our Fitz fans. But he was the gentleman who hid in the barn, deserted to die, and I did something similar. He was also the gentleman in We Agnostics who had the "Who are you to say there is no God?" And what happened is I believe it might have been in the writing, but it feels like it was in the sitting in God's presence. What came to me was a voice that was, how big is your God? How big is your God? And what came with that was an inner knowing. You either trust me or you don't. And you're asking these sponsees to take a leap of faith. I need you to take one too. And I was like, okay, okay, I'm gonna do that then. And I'm like, that's right. I'm gonna give up vaping. I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna do it. And I was working with more and more sponsees. And this was again pre-COVID, so I was meeting them in person, and they were back to back to back, and I wasn't able to go out for my little vape breaks. And I'm like, ooh, the nicotine level is going down. It's meant to be. And the day before I was supposed to quit, I was hit with, I'm sure nobody relates to this, the absolutely not, I've made a mistake. Nope, I'm going to give up being mean to me or something like that. Nope, I'm not doing it. Absolutely not. No, what a terrible idea that is. And I went to, the place where I used to meet sponsees all the time. And, we were sitting in a coffee shop and I was receiving one's fifth step. And had another one that was coming after, and we all go outside for a smoke. And, I'm talking a little bit like, that was a bad idea. I better not give this up. Anywho, what happens is my vape had a lanyard, and the lanyard caught on the brake of my wheelchair and smashed to the ground. And I haven't had nicotine since. And it's an example for me that if I put myself in the position, God will do for me what I cannot do for myself. Also, my best friend at the time did say I was a bit difficult to be around. I don't think that's true. I don't think that could be. But that idea that, like, man, this power will do for me what I cannot do for myself if I allow it. And I really did not think I could give up nicotine. So I don't consider myself an ex-smoker because, like when I was smoking, I'd be hauling on the smokes and they'd be like, that'll kill you. And then I'd be like, here's hoping, because I was a little antagonistic, just a little. So I don't consider myself an ex-smoker because I was like, I to quit, I got to go to like detox, and I'm not humble enough to do that, Uh, that's who I was. But this power will do for me that which I cannot do for myself. And so when you talk about this becoming a working part of my mind, this becoming a working part of my life, if I'm willing to allow this power to work, it will. And that is my lived experience. So it says, being still in experience with God and just having made conscious contact. Now, that conscious is that with knowing. In step 2, it's we agnostics. Ag is without, and gnosis is knowing. But it's not an intellectual knowledge based, it's a heart level, experiential knowing that they are talking about. I don't have any knowing of this power in step 2, but I take the course of action 4 through 9. And I continue that in step 10, and I continue that in step 11. And what I have is conscious contact. Conscious is Latin, and the word con means with, and chus or sire means knowing. So I go from without knowing to with knowing, that lived experience. But it's saying we've just made that conscious contact with God. It is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. You will be surprised that we are not raised to the level of like spiritual saints and gurus, and that we still sometimes argue about the direction the toilet paper has to go, or whatever, And so it says, we might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Now, if you're interested, you can make a little note to have a look at Tradition 2 and the 12 and 12. The pages are 136 to 138. Now, I don't got my 12 and 12 around, but I'm going to paraphrase it, is what I'm going to do. And in it is the story of Bill Wilson. And Bill Wilson, and he is broke as a joke. He's struggling financially, and he's got all these like alcoholics living in the house, and Lois is feeding them, and none of them are paying rent, and none of them are getting sober. And he is just struggling financially. And he goes to the town's hospital where he's working with other alcoholics trying to carry this message. And Charles Towns, the owner of the town's hospital, pulls Bill Wilson into his office and says, Bill, this is the money we used to make back in the day. And with what you're doing, I think if we hired you on, not as a doctor, but just as a lay therapist, a lay person working as a therapist, and you did this, and we'll give you some money, we'll give you an office, it'll help you be really effective to other people. And Bill Wilson is like, let me think about it. But he knows. He's like, yeah, that's the ticket, baby. That's the answer. And he's riding on the subway, which is a New York thing to do. And he has this thought in his mind. And the thought in his mind is a quote from a religious text. It's a quote from the Bible that says, the laborer is worthy of his hire. And it's this, I ought to be paid for my work. I'm working, and it's a piece of religious text that's come to mind. It's God talking to me. You know what I'm saying? And he is like, boom, that's the idea. And he goes home, and Lois is cooking for the drunks, and probably a little fed up after working her shift at like Macy's. I'm going to throw that in there, holding the glue of everything together. And Bill Wilson's like, Lois, I got an idea. And she's probably used to Bill Wilson having ideas. And he's like, Lois, I got this job opportunity at the town's hospital. I'm going to get paid to work with others. It's going to be great. Our money problems are solved. But Lois doesn't have that same excitement or enthusiasm. She's like, oh. And you can kind of tell she's not digging it. But he's Bill Wilson, so he's just going to keep going. And they have the little meeting at their house, and he gets up and he starts talking about what he experienced. And when you're doing a talk, and hopefully you guys don't, but I do, when you're doing a talk and you can tell that you've lost the room, he's having that experience where he's like, oh dear, I have lost the room. And he can see their faces fall, and he can see them be like, oh man. He can see that in them. And he's like, and telling the story, and he's like, I'm going to get paid. And then he, wraps up and it's quiet. And there's an alcoholic who, starts with a bit of a shaky voice, like, "Hey, Bill, I know you're hard up. We've seen how much you're struggling financially, and we've been wanting to help you, and we're trying to figure out how we can help you, but this isn't it." And the more he talks, the stronger his voice gets. And he's like, "Bill, you can't do this. If you tie up Alcoholics Anonymous with the town's hospital, you'll sink this thing. If we get tied up." And often, Bill Wilson, you have shared that the good is the enemy of the best. And there's nothing wrong with taking this job. There's nothing wrong with that. But because of who you are and what it would do to Alcoholics Anonymous, it would destroy us. And it would be the enemy of the best. Now, we can't tell you what to do, but man, you just can't do this thing. And he talks about that. That was the voice of God. And it's also a reminder that a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. You see, that's a line from step 5, a solitary self-appraisal. Me looking at me, trying to figure out me, does not work. I need to take it to other people. And what the Oxford group members would do is, if they had guidance, they would share the guidance with other Oxford group members. They would also hold up that guidance with the 4 absolutes. Bill Wilson wasn't a fan of the absolutes because, alcoholics tend to not be, well, we do tend to be a little all or nothing folks, but he knew that we weren't going to grab a hold of those real easy. But the 4 absolutes were absolute love, absolute unselfishness, absolute honesty, and absolute purity. Now, in case you're a little worried, you're like, purity? What? Do I need a Jonas Brothers era purity ring? No. It is purity of motive. And if I get an idea and I run it by another recovered member, there's a chance that, I'm going to get some guidance about whether or not it's a good idea. If I hold it up to, is it absolutely honest? Is it absolutely unselfish? Is it absolutely loving? And is it absolutely pure in motive? Even if it's not divine guidance, it's probably a better idea than if it wasn't. And that's sort of the thrust of what they were talking about there. And so that's this idea that we don't just come to things on our own. We work together. And I talk about this a lot. It's important for me, if I'm seeking the 4th dimension, to seek 4th dimension advice from 4th dimension people. That doesn't mean anyone's better than anyone. That doesn't mean anyone's worse than anyone. But if I want to grow spiritually, I've got to seek advice from people who are growing spiritually. Because you can tell when you're seeking advice from people who haven't made amends, and it's like, should I make amends? It's like, no, don't do that. But if I seek advice from people who have actually made their amends, it's going to be a different type of advice. And so that's what I mean, just to be conscientious of who I'm seeking guidance from. So it says, nevertheless, we will find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. Sneaky little promise there, that more and more our thought life will be on this higher plane. And it says we have come to rely upon this. So the experience that we have in our morning prayer and meditation practice, in constantly seeking, is one that it's not a flash in the pan. It's a daily experience that I'm after, that we get to grow, that we rely upon. And it becomes how we live our life. Now it says, we usually conclude the period of meditation. This is a meditative practice. I thought all I had to do was think. No, this period of meditation with a prayer. So here is another prayer. A prayer that we be shown all throughout the day what our next step is to be. That we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. So what does that prayer look like? It looks like, God, I ask, God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, I ask that I be shown all throughout the day what my next step is to be, that I be given whatever I need to take care of such problems. I ask especially for freedom from self-will. And so that's how we can say that prayer. And so when it says we are careful to make no requests for ourselves only, which is counterintuitive, because a lot of times I know I've shown up, you guys wouldn't, but I've shown up and I've treated God like a little like a vending machine. Like, I would like one boyfriend, a 6 boop, and like, give me. I would like a job, B4 boop, give me, I'd like money, doesn't matter where it comes from. D8, vend it, give it to me. It's about me, 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 me. But interestingly, has not the work that I've done up until this point illuminated the fact that I don't know what's best for me. In fact, has it not illuminated the fact that there is nobody who knows like worse for me than me? All the things I thought that would make me happy, and all the things that I thought I couldn't, you know what I mean? Listen, I'm frequently wrong. Deeply flawed, frequently wrong. That's me. So it goes on to say, we may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. Now, a lot of times we approach this in this black and white way. What does that look like? God, help me to be kind, patient, tolerant, self-sacrificing. God, help me to be of use to the people around me. God, when I struggle with that, my family member, because for some of us it's the holidays, and for some of us it's not, and that's okay. When I struggle with my family over turkey, I pray that you would help me to treat them all with kindness and love and tolerance. That's what we're talking about. And it's okay if somebody is hurting, if somebody's going through a hard time. This is how I like to pray for others, which is, God, I don't know what's best for them, but I pray that you would be with them in their time of need. I pray that if it be your will, you would help them X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And that's how I say it. But what we're trying to do is not tell God what to do, but to have God tell us what to do. I'm not in the God chair. I wasn't a good God. I was a terrible God. I can tell. If you're ever experiencing, and I know no one here would, if anyone here experiences overwhelm, it for me has been a sign that I am in the God chair and I'm a terrible higher power, because it's not working. I am not omnipotent. I am not omniscient. I am deeply limited and deeply flawed, and it ain't working. So it says, many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. And I'll share with you, there's a gal out of North Dakota, Judith R., and she would post these things that she wrote about like the spiritual journey, and she shared about how often we treat God, like a vending machine, but I also treat God like a painkiller. And I ought not, I know it called me right out. God is not meant to be a painkiller. God is not an aspirin that I take when life is hard. God is a relationship that I build, a life that I live. And that helped me to see how I could sometimes make demands of this power. So it goes on to say, if circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join in morning meditation. It's a powerful thing to pray, to meditate, to come together, and to do that in a group. It says if we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend to that also. So if there's things that you like to do, things you like to add, do it. Do it, whether you're in a religious organization or not. I'll share with you. I've got my little prayer book. You're like, it's what now? It's an Avengers notebook. I got it from for $1.50 at a liquidation superstore. And what I did was I wrote in prayers from the book, prayers that I got from other people in other places, and prayers that I liked. And it's prayers that I say on a daily basis, morning and night, that help guide me in the morning and help guide me in the evening. And if you're like, I don't want to do that, cool, don't do that. I do that though. And if anyone's interested, I can share that with you. And it says, if not members of religious bodies, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers which emphasize the principles we have been discussing. So if there's some prayers that we like, we can add them, we can move with them. And if there's some prayers, like we can write our own, we can reword them. Like if we're somebody like we hear the Lord's Prayer and it makes us bristle, and why don't we rewrite it and have a new experience with it? Do you know what I'm saying? And if you're like, I would never do that, wonderful. Let's write 4-column inventory on it. Column 1, the Lord's Prayer. Column 2, why? My resistance is always information that I can use to help me bring about a deeper experience of this power, even if I don't pick up a particular faith. And so it goes on to say, there are many helpful books also. And actually, when it talks about memorizing a few set prayers, one of the common misconceptions is this idea that prayer means petitionary prayer, which is asking God for things. That's only one form of prayer. In fact, many forms of prayer, I'm going to ruin everyone's day, were actually meditation. Like a prayer of quiet, a prayer of contemplation. They were the prayer of remembrance, the prayer of recollection. Guess what they were? Meditation practices. Oh man, I've ruined your day. If you're like, I don't want to do meditation. Well, I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying lots of meditation, but it was tucked under the word prayer, which tells us that if I'm stuck on a definition, I might not have the full picture. So it goes on to say, there are many helpful books also. And in 2025, if I want to grow and I want to seek, there are so many things that I can do. Books, podcasts, lectures, places I can go, yoga studios. There's like so much things that I can do to help me grow spiritually. But it's important to understand that I'm not trying to do that instead of the 12 steps. I need to take the course of action, the 12 steps. And that then allows me to seek at a deeper level. I can't use it as a way to avoid the hard work, because I'll keep because experientially, I'll keep coming up against that which is blocking me every single time. I'm trying to avoid it, and it's always there, So it says, suggestions about these may be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Now, this is a suggestion. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they have to offer. And when I began to do that, that's when my step 11 took off. Borrowing from a variety of faith traditions and seeking. And you don't have to. But what I will tell you is there's joy in seeking. There's joy in experiencing. And I talk a lot about how the spiritual life is a lot like dating. And I've got to talk to that partner. I've got to listen. This hopefully is not brand new information for those of you who are in relationships. We have to listen. I've also got to clear away the stuff, the barriers between us. I've got to build intimacy and vulnerability. We've got to have shared experiences, just like I would with a human being. And it's like that in the spiritual life. So for me, all the ways in which I seek are complementary to the work that I do in 12-step, but never instead of the work of 12-step. So, and there's a whole lot of fun. I'll tell you about it after if you're ever interested in some of the things I've done. A lot of fun. And so now what we're transitioning into is so we spoke about when we retire at night, which was originally a morning direction, so it doesn't matter when you do it, but nighttime, morning time, and now these are the directions on what to do as we go throughout our day. So it says, so daytime directions, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. Now here's my experience. I need to have that meditative practice to have enough space between me and my thoughts to be able to pause. The pause does not come intuitively for this little tangent little being, all over the place, no attention span. I don't have a natural pause. These steps work together to support the pause. So when I meditate, it helps me pause. When I go through my day and I have a look at the resentments I had and I take them through the columns, when I have a look at the fears that I have and I take them through the columns, I'm able to see them better. And that work that I do in the morning and I do also in the evening supports the pause. So, because I need God's help to pause, clearly, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. So it says pause and ask. And whenever it talks about ask or to ask or we ask, that is a prayer. So if I feel agitated, which is a resentment, if I feel doubtful, which is fear, I pause and I ask God to remove it. Now, I want to point out what happens. So experientially, what happens if I notice, which is not always, I miss things, but if I notice and I pause and I say that prayer and then it goes, what happens is I am distracted by other things and I'm off doing this and I'm off doing that and I'm off doing that and I'm gone. No worries. We're glad you're back. When you're running a little late, I'm like, oh, I hope it's not the storm. Just worried about you. You'll be fine. Okay, focus page. Let's see? Do you see? What'll happen is I'll say the prayer, God, take this from me, direct my attention to what you would have me do. I'll say the resentment or whatever it is, and then off I go. I'm on a tangent talking about somebody's Wi-Fi. What's the weather going on in New York? And I'm there, right? But here's the thing. Let's say I say the prayer and it's there. And I'm doing that thing. You guys wouldn't do it, but I'm debating. What do I do? Do I do a 10th step? What do I do? It's still there. And that's when we go back to the directions in step 10. So if you pop over to page 84, and it's the second full paragraph, and I'm going to go about halfway down the paragraph. I'm not going to read all of the paragraph. But it says, when it says continue, so this is not an overnight matter. That's where we go. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, so they will, which is rude, we ask God at once to remove them. So I say that prayer. And if they've not gone, and I know they've not gone because they're still there, because I'm not like, squirrel, what's happening? I want to go ride bikes. I can't ride a bike. So I don't want to do that. But you see what I mean? I'm off spinning. I'm spinning my wheels, doing something else, right? But if it's still there, I need to then, step 3, discuss them with someone immediately. And I take it to somebody and I take it through the columns. Then I make amends if I've harmed anyone and I turn my thoughts to someone I can help. And that right there is where we see this interplay between step 10 and 11, that these work together. Now, that's not our only interplay. We were talking about, hey, what if I miss things in step 10? Or what if I miss things as I go throughout my day? Well, I will, because I'm a human being and I'm just starting this spiritual way of life. I'm not going to be perfect. And the evening review allows me to catch it. So it doesn't build. It doesn't build. And then that's the grace that we get, that I don't have to be perfect. The 12 steps, God and the book meets me where I'm at. So it goes on to say, we back on page 87, as we go throughout the day, we pause when agitated, resentment, or doubtful, fear, and ask for the right thought or action. So that's a prayer. And then it says, we constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show. Humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. So what it's saying is that this prayer, thy will be done, is something that's meant to work a little as a mantra, that we're moving throughout the day, that we're saying constantly, thy will be done, thy will be done. Thy will not mine be done, thy will be done, thy will not mine be done. Which, by the way, was a meditative practice that existed, since like the early, when was it? Maybe I feel like either the 1st or the 6th century. I don't know why those numbers, but those are the ones in my brain. But those types of meditative practices existed for centuries, which is to say, meditation existed. I know, I'm just the worst. So humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. Because I need to remember that decision that I made in step 3, that I work for this power, and that thy will be done. God's will is being done. I just got to get out of the way. And the most powerful thing is when God's will can be done through me. And that's the power of the 12 steps, to get me out of the way so this power can flow through me. It goes on to say, we are then in much less danger. So these are things that can be dangerous, of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. Now, anger makes a lot of sense. Anger is resentment. It's just a hot and fresh one, ready to go. And we spoke about how resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. I got to get free from this resentment. So it makes sense that I would be in danger from resentment. And we talk about fear and worry. Well, fear is that evil and corroding thread that eats away at the fabric of my existence. Of course, I need to get free of it. And worry is just fear with legs, fear that's running around on the little hamster wheel that is in my mind. That's what worry is, of course. Of course. And worry comes from that place of me having the slight idea that I am an ineffective higher power, but not get my butt out of the God chair. So that makes sense. And then when we talk about the danger of self-pity, let me tell you, here's my experience. Self-pity is that warm blanket. Ooh, and I get to wrap myself up and feel so sorry for myself. But as I'm tucked right in, it turns into a noose. And it becomes that thing that kills me. You see, when I'm in self-pity, I am in self, and I can't see past me. I see me on me, and there is no relief. And that is the bondage of self, and I'm wrapped up in it. And it talks about or foolish decisions. So foolish decisions, like which sorts of ones? Well, we spoke in our sex inventory about, those foolish decisions and what we're supposed to do. But I'll point out when it talks about excitement, the danger of excitement and foolish decisions can work together. I can be excited about my plans and my designs and how I think I need it to go, or a brand new relationship with Mr. Right, or Mr. Right Now, or in my case, Mr. Right out of jail. Yeah, you know. Oh, right? Like I'll get caught up in that and I'm excited. But that excitement doesn't allow me that ability to pause, to see, to talk to others. Do you know what I mean? And I can be so sure of something and unable to see the effects that it might have on others. So when we are moving with thy will be done, we are in much less danger of those things. And what are those things blocking us from? God. I need to have that connection with, and when I say God, I mean God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. It is simply a title for that power which I need. It is a title. It is pointing to what I'm after. And we know it's a title because I gave a lot of things the informal title of God, like a career or a relationship, or, and I'm sure no one here relates to having all these, like if I get a car, if I get this type of, Xbox, then I'll be okay. Like whatever it is, I make those things God. So God is a title, but I'm after what is beyond the title. So it says we become much more efficient. And some of y'all know I am an efficient alcoholic. If you're like, oh, girl, you young. And I'm like, yeah, this little alcoholic, this little crackhead, I got sober young because I was efficient. I efficiently burnt my life to the ground. I'm here for efficiency. And so when it says we become much more efficient, we do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. So it's a tie back to the third step. And in the third step, when we're talking about me in the delusion of the God chair, or I like to talk about, I've got that video game controller that's not plugged in and I'm pushing all the buttons, but it's not working and I look like I'm doing stuff, but the world isn't responding. And when I live in that way, it's exhausting. And here's what I found is when I am, now keep in mind, I do struggle with health issues, so I have chronic fatigue, but what I found is when I'm tired, and I mean exhausted, and I don't have a reason for it, it's usually I am in self-will, and I have been an ineffective God trying to arrange the world to suit myself. Because that's exhausting. Because y'all don't do what I think you should do, and I didn't tell you, but you should know. But you know what I mean? It's exhausting. I'm trying to manage and control things that I have no ability and power to control. And I think my happiness rests in the world being how I need it to be. But my happiness rests in the here and now with God. And that's exhausting. So when I'm tired and I'm burnt out and I'm worn out and I'm not quite sure why, it's a sign for me that I am in self-will. Also, when I have the thought, just while I'm talking about little signs that I'm in self-will, when I have the thought, what about me? Oh, I'm in self-centeredness. Oh, that's also a little hallmark that pages when I'm like, what about me? Well, what about me? Oh, I'm in trouble. That's how I know. So it goes on to say, it works. It really does. And that is another promise that this thing works. This power works. The 11th step works. The 12 steps work. It works. And it really does. It works. But I've got to do it. It doesn't work as an idea. It doesn't work as a theory. It doesn't work as, that's nice to talk about. It works when I take the actions. Now it goes on to say, we alcoholics are undisciplined. Rude to call me out in the last paragraph. I wasn't expecting that. Undisciplined, how accurate. We are undisciplined. So we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. Now, we're not talking about that corporal punishment or anything like that. When we talk about discipline, what we're talking about is the daily program of action. I call them the daily discipline. And we all know what it's like to try to start a daily prayer life, a daily meditation life, try to do our evening reviews on a daily basis. We know what that's like when we do it once, and then we don't do it for 3 weeks. And then we do it for 3 days, and then we don't do it for 3 weeks. And then we try to do it all at once, and we don't even do it. And we all know that struggle. And so when we talk about being disciplined, what I found to be very helpful is to start small. And I spoke about this as we're going through step 11. But with prayer, with meditation, with evening review, start small, like do 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes of meditation a day. And you will build that. If I can do that a day, every day, it will build and it will grow on its own. If with prayer, if all I can do is start with one prayer out of the book, guide my thinking today, wonderful. Start there, but do it every day, and it will build momentum. Whatever I do builds momentum. So action builds momentum, but inaction builds momentum. So the more that I'm not doing it, the harder it is to do it. So I start small, build consistently. That's what we're talking about. So it says, but this is not all. What? I mean, this whole chapter was into action. I thought when I would be done that, I'd be done all this action. You're asking so much of me. But that is not all. There is action and more action. What? Well, we just did into action. What do you mean there's more? But wait, there's more. And it says, faith without works is dead. Now, that faith without works is dead is a theme that we've seen throughout this book again and again and again. What does it mean? What it means is faith in God, in the big book, in the 12 steps, in whatever fellowship you're a part of, faith in your sponsor, all of that means nothing if I don't take the action. So I can have faith in God or a higher power. I can have faith in the steps. I can have faith in my sponsor. I can have faith in my fellowship. But if I do not take all 12 steps as a way of life, I will relapse. That's what it means. That's what faith without works is dead. I can have belief, but if I don't do all this, I will relapse. And so it says, the next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12. And so that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to get into the 12th step. And the 12th step, man, that's where this thing, not that it hasn't already come alive, but man, That's where the freedom is. So what I will do is I will stop the recording. We'll pick it up there next week, and I'll set it so we all can unmute, and we'll say the Serenity Prayer together. So.